Welcome to the Weekly Juice Podcast, where we discuss all things real estate, personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and the many ways to achieve financial independence. We interview accomplished investors and entrepreneurs with the goal that their stories inspire you to take control of your financial future. Here to get your creative juices flowing, while also documenting their own personal investing journeys, are your hosts, Corey Jacobson and Ryan Bevilacqua.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, it's your boys Ryan and Corey here with another episode. Today we had a fun one. We interviewed Jon Jasniak. He's an entrepreneur from Coronado, Texas that buys and sells land. He started flipping land back in 2016 when he was 23 while he was working full-time as an engineer. And then after a year and a half of doing both, he quit his job to go into the land flipping game full-time. So over the last 7 years, Jon has done over 700 deals, accounting for over 7,000 acres, and built an 8-figure land business by age 30. So
I got one thing, right? He's the mayor of a town that he bought, which is like pretty cool. It's one of the things we talk about throughout the episode. This dude actually bought a town, and one of those towns that you basically I describe
unincorporated, it's called.
Yeah, that's what. Oh yeah, it's an unincorporated town where basically it's like in between two major cities in the middle of Texas, where it's like there's nothing for 50 miles on one side, there's nothing for 50 miles on the other, so they can sell gas at like $10 a gallon or something. So it's like one of those old Western type towns that he wants to turn into like a glamping site and a place where people can come stay at a motel. And apparently it's one of the only places in Texas or in I guess the West where you can see he said the Milky Way, which is pretty insane. I didn't even know you could see that. Aren't we in the Milky Way?
Yeah, but he's like, if you look up, I guess see the galaxy,
yeah.
Orion's Belt, the Big Dipper, Little Dipper.
So cool.
I mean, should I keep going? I know a couple of these things.
that was good.
No, I know none other. I would have been totally stumbling. But I would say this is a really fun episode for us. Talked about a different topic that we have not covered really at all. One person talked about land flipping, but not as granular as this. I just think it's so cool because you think of property when we talk about buying real estate, we always are kind of focused on the property itself. This episode, Jon focuses on the land, and there's so many different people that buy land. Some buy it for recreational, whether they're going to go out, shoot guns, raise cattle, it's more like a rec area.
Midwestern
ATVs,
stuff.
Midwestern, yeah, whatever. And then I always thought of land as like, well, who would want to put up a house here or like put up an Airbnb little resort, whatever. There's a lot of different aspects to this, but Jon has become an expert in just about 7 years.
Yeah, Jon really knows his stuff. And his next phase is going to be starting to raise capital to take down bigger deals. And we talked to him about that because that's obviously something that we've done. But I think we should bring Jon in. But before we do, I wanted to mention, if you're listening to the show and you like what Ryan and I have put out, we don't ask this a lot, but I really would request if you could leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. It helps us a ton. It gives us visibility for the actual platforms to raise us in the rankings, and then also allows us to bring on higher quality guests, because one of our goals for the rest of the year and just moving forward is to make sure that our episodes are not repetitive, but that they're giving you new actionable advice each and every week. And in order to do that, we need more ratings. So if you would please leave us a review, that would be awesome.
Yes, please leave us a review. Super helpful. Couldn't echo more than what Corey just said. But lastly, I will say, without further ado, let's bring in the owner and mayor of Coronado, Texas, the man who bought a town, Jon Jasniak. When you have investment properties and tenants, you need a good system in place for collecting rent to make it easy as possible. And RentRedi can help you with everything. When you sign up for RentRedi, you can start adding your properties, inviting tenants, and creating charges. You can even set up automatic rent reminders and create auto late fees as well. For tenants, they can pay via ACH, card, or even cash using RentRedi's web and mobile apps. They can also use an automatic payment setup and sign up for rent reporting so they get rewarded for paying rent on time. RentRedi saves you time and hassle by automating rent collection, and you can manage everything from one dashboard. For our Weekly Juice listeners, RentRedi's given us a special 50% off for any RentRedi plan using our code WeeklyJuice at rentredi.com. That's RentRedi.com using the code WeeklyJuice. That's WeeklyJuice to save 50% off any RentRedi plan. Jon, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show, man. As I mentioned, pre-recording, done some research on you. You're doing some really cool things and some things that we actually haven't really chatted too much about on our podcast. So we are very excited to share your story and highlight all that you have going on.
Well, Ryan, Corey, thank you guys so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, let's do it. So let's start here. Take us on the journey back, I guess, from the beginning. Talk pre-real estate, if there's anything, and then walk us up to kind of some of the things that you're doing now and your evolution of how you became the entrepreneur that you are.
Yeah, so pre-real estate, I was typical 9 to 5. I was a petroleum engineer, and I was working out on the drilling rigs mostly. I was drilling oil and gas wells. It's kind of funny, the land flipping niche, a lot of people got started in 2016 and 2017. It seems like there were some other folks like myself going on podcasts and stuff at the time, and that's how I found out about the whole real estate and land flipping thing, was on a podcast just like this. A guy like me came on. I was literally like driving to the oil rig. I would listen to hours and hours of podcasts a week, and some guy comes on and starts talking about land flipping. But, you know, I went to school, typical 4-year engineering degree, went to Texas Tech, graduated in 4 years, got out, started working 9 to 5. And I didn't really dislike what I was doing, to be honest. I liked engineering. I liked being out in the field. Oil and gas was kind of fun. Just it's almost like the camaraderie and like group setting of like all the guys and stuff. But I just hated going into the office and just like felt like I was constantly hitting the ceiling. Like I was getting paid well and I had a bonus and all that stuff. But I was like, man, there's got to be something more. Like I just, you know, don't like being told this is how much you make. This is what you do. You know, you're working, providing a ton of value, drilling millions and millions of dollars of oil wells, but you're only getting paid this much per year. So I was like, there's got to be something else that I can do to take it to the next level. I was just, I don't know, always determined to do more. And land flipping wasn't the first thing I tried. I kind of just stumbled into it, I guess, by happenstance.
Nice. So I guess take us to the next step from there, right? You had the light bulb where you're like, whoa, something needs to change. I realize I'm getting paid a fraction of what I think I'm worth, and I can get creative here. So walk us through that journey, and then take us into what land flipping actually is, because I don't think a lot of people understand what all of it entails. I think about it as more of like flipping a house, but on the land side. So, that's probably very basic, and you're like, dude, you have no idea what you're saying. So take us through that.
Yeah. There's so many different facets of the land niche itself. So yeah, for sure. I think what kind of really started it was, I'll never forget, I was doing my performance review after my first 6 months as a petroleum engineer. And I walk into my manager's office, and this dude, super nice guy, he's like, yo, Jon, we've never seen anyone perform quite like this. Like their first 6 months out of school, like you're crushing it. I was in the business development group, cranking out numbers and analyzing like hundreds of millions of dollars of oil and gas prospects. I walk in, sit down, it's late at night. We've been staying up late at night, cranking out projects, everything. He's like, performance review, you're getting a 4 out of 5. And I was like, okay, why am I getting a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5? Kind of, politely asked him. He's like, this just is the way it is. I would love to give you a 5, but just nobody gets a 5. You get a 4 out of 5. And so I kind of just started thinking in my mind, like, how much extra energy did I put in to try and get this bonus, even though I got a 4 out of 5, even if I would have got a 5 out of 5, like how much extra energy could I be applying towards something else? And boom, right at that time is when I turn on Side Hustle Show, episode 108, Nick Loper. He had on Mark Podolsky, another land flipping guy, and it comes on, starts pitching his course, etc. And I'm like, okay, this sounds pretty cool. I've flipped stuff before, I've done products, garage selling a little bit. I was like, man, maybe I could just do this with land. So I buy Mark's course, I buy another course, and start studying it day in, day out. After my job on the weekends, I started, watching video modules and joining free groups, listening to free podcasts. And next thing you know, after about a month, I'm buying my first piece of land. It was 53 acres out in the Gunsight Ranch in Hudspeth County, Texas, for $8,500. And it's about 150, 170 per acre. And I turn around and sell it all on Facebook, on the Facebook Marketplace in like a month or two, and doubled my money. And so I made like $8,500. It was kind of my first hit in the land space. And I'm like, okay. So I immediately fired up some direct mail. I started mailing counties in like West Texas desert, picking up 10-acre lots for like $1,500 or $2,000 a pop. And I would turn around and owner finance them off to people who wanted to own 10 acres in the middle of nowhere to go shoot guns or whatever. And I was getting, $150, $250 a month for 48, 60, 72 months at a time on these little 10-acre lots. And next thing you know, I built up this monthly kind of recurring revenue of note portfolio of $13,000 per month. My first year, I was making just from people paying me every month on on pieces of land. And so we kind of talk about land flipping. Like that's one aspect of land flipping, is like going out and buying these small lots in the middle of nowhere. We call them desert squares, and turn around and quote unquote flipping them as quickly as you can to customers who want to go out and, that stuff's just rec land, but the uses are kind of endless. And that's just, one part of this quote unquote land flipping game. That was my first year in business. I think I did like over $200,000 in revenue from the land business. And then it was a year and a half after I actually started flipping land to where I quit my job as an engineer.
Well, what's really fascinating about this, Jon, is it's funny you talked about like the output. This is like the magical piece of being an entrepreneur. You working your ass off and they give you a 4 out of 5. And the reason that they do that is because there can always be better. You can always do better, right? And you can only they want you to do better and better and better and take on more and more and more work. But the direct proportion of pay that they can pay you based on this organizational chart is just not anywhere near the amount of output that it takes to work significantly harder. Now, you switch that over to being an entrepreneur and it's like, oh no, if you make X amount of calls, you put X amount of more time in, as long as you're going in the right path, you can control your destiny so much further. And I assume that's exactly what clicked inside you, doing $200,000 in your first year, which is, by the way, that's pretty rare for somebody starting out. There's a lot of dudes who get out there and do nothing or negative in the first couple of years until they're able to figure it out. So that light bulb probably hit you pretty hard.
Yeah. And I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I think one thing I really love about real estate too is like you get a linear proportion basically for the amount of effort and work you put in, the amount of calls you're making, the amount of leads you're generating, et cetera, is, most of the time directly proportionate to how much money you're going to make in the business. 9 to 5, you're capped, obviously. A lot of other businesses, even like I used to try to trade stocks. Like I was a stock trader for a little bit. It's like you can lose money trading stocks. People, obviously, a lot of people know that very well. So that's one thing I love about real estate is it's like the more effort and work you put into it, the more money you're hopefully going to make, as long as you're making decent decisions.
Got it.
I think real estate makes the most millionaires.
It does. 90% is, at least that's the stat that's flying around. I'm pretty sure it's true, but I don't have any data.
90% of millionaires become so through real estate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've heard it everywhere. But so I want to talk about the land notes. You briefly brought it up. Maybe if you could paint this picture for us, for people that don't know. I know you mentioned that there's a passive income aspect here. If you could dive a little bit deeper into how that actually works, I think that's really cool. There's a lot more land where you live in Texas than where we live in the Philadelphia area, but I imagine that this can be done anywhere. So like, give us the breakdown of how this actually works.
Well, Pennsylvania and the Midwest, that whole area has a lot of good land. You just got to get outside of the cities. But a lot of people, there's this common misnomer that land can't cash flow. I'm a huge cash flow guy. Like that's why I love this business, is because you can sell your pieces of land off on monthly payments. You can owner finance it to people, and that's 90% of my sales come that way. And it's allowed me to generate kind of this huge note portfolio that I manage, and then my customers pay me every month. Now it is true, unlike other forms of real estate, whether it's like single family or multifamily or whatever, like they pay off that note to you on owner financing. Like the land is theirs. You have to go generate another note. So it's not like an infinite time frame here, like it's a house or multifamily. So that's important to distinguish. But there's basically an infinite amount of land out there. Like there's so many people doing this, including myself. Like it would be literally impossible for me to do all the land deals. It's basically an infinite source. So you need to go obviously do more deals, and that's what we do. But kind of a typical owner finance note for me nowadays is probably, I'm buying and subdividing a piece of land. I'm probably buying and originating like a 10-acre note at like $500 a month for 120 months. Someone's paying me. It's like a $43,000 note at 7% interest, total of $60,000 over 10 years. My cost basis on that land is probably like $15,000. So, 10, $15,000, you're buying a piece of land, you're creating a note for $500 a month for 120 months. I'd say it's pretty basic nowadays. Back then, I was buying a piece of land for like I said, $1,500 or $2,000, and I would sell them for like $200 a month for 36 months. So in like 10 months, I'd be paid out on my piece of land or less. I mean, if I got a big down payment, I could be paid out basically immediately. But something like that, 3, 5, even 10x your purchase on a piece of land on owner financing is not unheard of in the land space.
So take us through this as if like you were doing, I don't know, like tomorrow. I'm thinking like the start to finish process of someone that just hears the podcast and like, dude, this sounds great, right? Obviously, I know you have a community and we'll talk about that, but I'm thinking about typically if someone wants to go buy a piece of property, they hire a realtor, right? And then they go through the process of like getting the deal sent through the MLS. Maybe they try to make connections and get some off-market deals and find properties that way and underwrite them. How are you handling that? I assume it's like you as the one-man army going out and trying to analyze all the deals yourself, put them together, buy it from one person, and then, you're kind of like the middleman reaching out and marketing towards the new buyer as well. So I know there's a lot there, but I'm just trying to conceptualize like the start to finish process.
Yeah, let's kind of walk someone through it. And what I love that you just said is like, it's so easy to start a land business and do it all yourself. Like I think I got to like 3 or 4 million. I was looking at it the other day, like a $3 or $4 million company before I actually even hired someone. So that's kind of crazy.
That's
you
awesome.
Can't do that in a land space. It's pretty dang easy. That's why I like it. But starting from start to finish, what I always tell people is you got to get out there and just see what is listed and what is available. You mentioned Philadelphia. Someone out there is listening from New York or Austin, Texas, or Dallas or wherever. Hop on the MLS on either Zillow or landsofamerica.com. Start seeing what is listed and what is for sale. Kind of set your filters. You can set it for a max of 10K, 20K, 50K for a piece of land. See what is kind of just popping off out there. From there, we kind of paint this picture of, okay, in this particular area, it looks like land is selling, 10 acres is selling for 50 grand. Okay, so now how much do I need to buy this piece of land for to make money? Usually, depending on the price point, it's 40, 50 cents on the dollar is kind of a good ballpark estimate. So a piece of land they're selling for 50,000, you ought to be able to buy that for 25 or 30 G's. We get our data from either the counties themselves, the county databases, or like a third-party distributor, like a Data Tree, First American Title. There's plenty of data sources out there where you can pull landowner data, and then we reach out directly to the landowners, either direct mail or SMS texting, say, hey, Mr. Landowner, we see you got 10 acres in XYZ County, Texas. We'd like to buy it for $30,000. And then it becomes just a numbers game, and we find someone who's interested in selling 10 acres for 30 grand. We'll either buy it or lock it down with some sort of, creative contract or option agreement. And then we'll turn around and market it ourselves, mostly on Facebook. I love Facebook for marketing, or, we use a little bit of MLS and definitely landsofamerica.com, the same place we're looking for land. We're selling on there as well. So we'll lock this piece down or buy it and turn around and start marketing it immediately with the goal to sell it as soon as possible to, Sally or Joe who wants to go out there and either build a home or just go shoot some guns or ride around the ATV or whatever it may be. And that's kind of the arbitrage, is literally buy for less, sell for more, and do it as quickly as possible. That's the goal.
Very cool. I like it a lot, dude. It's cool. It's super niche, but it's interesting. You always think about people buying properties. You're buying property and the land on top of
it's just like
the property.
It's just like the least sexy version of real estate,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like most people are talking about, whether it's ground up development or making an old multifamily space into like this brand new, like this cool design or whatever it is. And like, you can feel it and touch it. This is just it seems like it's a cash flowing business that's like very unsexy, which is sometimes some of the best businesses.
It's unsexy. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of tax advantages. You can't depreciate land, but land has, I think, the highest returns. And as I touched on, is the most simple facet of real estate. And so I always tell people, start with, in my opinion, land, the basics. All your multifamily, single family, everyone needs land, by the way, and make a ton of money buying and selling land. You can scale this business with subdividing, which is what I've done. And then once you start actually making some real income, some real money, some real, taxable income, then, multifamily, commercial, mobile home parks, RV parks, start looking for ways where you can build wealth and not have to pay tax on the huge chunk of cash that you just generated from your land profits. And that's kind of been my evolution of the business.
Very cool. So can you talk to just the marketing piece a little bit? I'm kind of fascinated about, you mentioned Facebook ads, and then, you're marketing towards, you mentioned people going out and shooting guns, riding the ATVs. I'm thinking like just enjoying the land for what it is, not building anything on top of it, right? Like having like a recreational parcel, if you will. How are you gearing up? First of all, I want to know how you value the land. Like, I'm trying to think of this. You touched on it briefly. You're like, okay, if I buy it for 50 grand. I know that it's listed for 50 grand. I know I need to buy it for 25 or 30. How do you underwrite these deals and kind of know, okay, this is what the market's saying and this is what I know I can sell it for? Because I'm trying to think of like, okay, we could go buy a piece of land, but I have no clue if I'm going to get Joe or Sally to come in and buy it for 50 cents on the dollar or whatever you mentioned earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And it's really the biggest hurdle, I think, for someone who's just starting in the land business is like doing that first deal. They're very scared, very nervous. Like, am I buying this right? I still get nervous today. Is someone actually going to buy this piece of land? Like, I'll do $1 million subdivision and I'm still nervous. Like, is all these pieces going to sell? But at the end of the day, they always end up selling. So it depends on the state. Some states are non-disclosure states. They don't publicly kind of list or display what land is selling for, but there are states that do. There's some states you can literally go into the county database, the GIS system. You can start clicking on parcels on the map and it will start telling you, oh, this land was sold to Sally Johnson in 2021 for $40,000 and it was sold to Joe Schmo next door for $42,000. And you can start painting a picture of like, okay, this 1 acre is worth $40,000. I need to buy it for $25,000 or $20,000, whatever it is. So that's one way. You look at what's listed as well. I mean, we touched on that kind of. What's listed is not what has sold, though. That's an important distinguish there to recognize. You can tell what's sold by either it's a the state's disclosing it, that's info is publicly available, or if it's a non-disclosure state, there's certain tricks that we use, such as Texas, non-disclosure state. One of my favorite tricks is actually to go into a site called Texas File. Every state has their own different websites where you can start pulling publicly recorded documents. So like if I'm going into a new area in Texas, I literally search that area and I find any of the sales documents that have been publicly recorded. So anytime someone owner finances a piece of real estate off in Texas, they need to record a deed of trust, a mortgage note basically. So I can go in and start pulling those notes and say, okay, there was 1 acre raw land that sold for $40,000 over 10 years. Boom, I got an immediate comparable in a non-disclosure state. So those public records are available in any non-disclosure state. You just got to find how to get them. So that's the best way to get direct comparables, I think. Kind of a proprietary thing that I coined is the Facebook demand test. So we will actually kind of like an e-com. A lot of e-com guys, you see those Instagram ads where it's like some crazy product and it's like buy now, and you click on it and it's like, it's $10 or whatever, and they don't actually have the product to sell you. Like they're just collecting, cost per click and like kind of generating metrics in the background to say, okay, if I can get this product for X amount, I can sell it to a customer for X amount and make this amount of money. So we do the same thing with land. We'll actually post like little feeler ads on Facebook and run either no ads or a minimal amount of ads to it, like 50 or $100, and just see what people start messaging and how much a cost per lead is running on an ad for land in that area. I do that before I step into any new territory. And we've had a ton of success doing that. Anything under $10 per lead is good. Anything under $5 per lead right now is kind of smoking hot, in my opinion. So, if I got a piece of land near Dallas, Fort Worth that I'm trying to market 10 acres, I'm like, man, I don't know if 10 acres is going to sell out in Hill County, Texas, in the middle of nowhere. Boom, fire up a Facebook demand test. And shoot, I just did one out there a few weeks ago. We were getting like $275 per lead. I'm like, holy smokes, no water, no nothing on this land. $275 per lead for a 10-acre lot out there. It was like, that's crazy smoking hot. That's kind of how I kind of paint the picture and build it.
We've done this test similarly for when we were renting out like a burr project we did, or just a single family home. Like we would just like, which I think is similar. We'll just like, what do we think this is going to be worth when we're done the project? Let's put out, photos of a similar unit or something like that. Put it on there. Yep. It's not even for rent. Are people going to get hits at $2,500 a month? Are we going to get hits at $2,700? If we get flooded with inquiries at $2,700, okay, maybe this is a little low. That way we know something similar in the similar area. Even if it's not the actual listing, I feel like that's actually it's a great point, and you can do it in many facets of the real estate business. So that's very cool.
Dude, it's so easy too. I don't know why more real estate investors don't utilize the marketplace. Like you could literally post up a building for rent on the marketplace and see who messages you and what your demand comes in at. Or if you get a bunch of trolls and haters hating on you, you're probably asking too much.
Right. Well, that's true too. They can steer you in a different direction. But so the land flipping's awesome, and I'm wondering how that, either whether it transitioned. I know you bought a town, right? So an unincorporated town, in Cornutus. Is that how you pronounce it? Cornutus?
Yep, Cornutus, Texas.
Cornutus.
That's
Okay,
the
got
town.
it. And I'm wondering, one, why you purchased it, how you came upon it, and like your vision for this town, because it's for us, like I think it's like one thing to buy land and flip it. It's one thing to to sell or finance it, but like a town seems like a lot more effort and work. And like, how do you buy a town?
Well, it has been a lot more effort and work. I guess it kind of all originated with, I've been on this huge push recently to be like, grow my brand, grow my social media, etc. I kind of want to be the known figure in the land space, and that's kind of the big push I'm making. And it kind of tied into that. I saw it came up for sale in early 2022. Someone just kind of sent me a Facebook marketplace. It was posted on Facebook, sent me the listing, and like, hey, you should check this out. And it was in Hudspeth County, which is where I did my first land deal, and I actually did my first subdivide as well. I bought 534 acres. It's actually only 2 miles away from Cornutus. I bought 534 acres out there. It would have been in 2017 for $40,000. It was like, what is that? It's like $73 or $78 per acre. You can still find land nowadays for less than $100 per acre, believe it or not, in some areas. Yeah, you gotta get lucky, but even with direct mail, you can get people if the acreage is big enough and the land's in the middle of nowhere, less than $100 per acre. So I kind of ripped this big subdivide out there, and it kind of took my business to a whole nother level. And fast forward to 2022, someone sent me this listing. Like, okay, Hudspeth County. I've driven by Cornutus a million times. I've never stopped. But it's got a little cafe out there, and it's like all these red buildings. I'm like, okay. They wanted, I think it was like $550,000 on Facebook, and so I'm like, man, it's the middle of nowhere. Like, I got all this stuff going on. I don't think I can do it. And it kind of just 2022 went by, and it kind of just in the back of my head. And I revisited it later in the year. I'm like, let's just go check out the property and see what happens. So I took my dad out there. It's like 8.5 hours west of Fort Worth, which is where I live. So we go out there, just me and him, literally leave in the morning, get out there, get there kind of middle afternoon, and meet the current owner and kind of get a whole tour of the property. And it was like, man, I thought some stuff was going to go down. Like, I was like, there's certain times I was like, can I get out of the truck and like take a video of this or that? He's like, no videos. You can find all this stuff online, whatever. So like, he was like, my dad was like, man, what is this guy's deal? That was a whole adventure in and of itself. We felt like we weren't going to get out of there at a couple occasions.
Why do you say that? I'll let you continue. But the when I've seen the video that you posted on your social media on Instagram, and this town, for people that are listening, looks like the town that you strive to get to when you push your car after you've been pushing it for 1.5 miles and you need gas and you're in the middle of nowhere. Like, that's what it looks like in the movies. Like it's like, oh, I finally made it to the diner and the gas station that I've been like, and there could be somebody in the hills like waiting for you.
Dude, I was thinking the Hills of Eyes, and I'm like, dude, that's also the gas station you got to drive right by. Like it's like you pray you don't have to
not after John's done with it, but maybe before. Yeah. So continue.
And we do sell gas out there, by the way, but yeah, we sell probably 1 or 2 a day. We do emergency gas for $10 per gallon with a 5-gallon minimum. So we literally get it's averaging out right now about 1 person per day asking for gas out there. Because where this thing is at is it's along a decently trafficked highway. It's like 2,500 or so cars per day travel along Highway 62-180 from El Paso through the Guadalupe Mountains up to Carlsbad, New Mexico. And so it's kind of out in the middle of the desert. And you'll drive out there and there's literally nothing, and this is your only spot until 50 miles to El Paso or 70 miles to Carlsbad the other way. So kind of back to our first visit, like, I'm like, can I get a sample of the well? And he's like, you can, but I'll shoot you. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's like we leave this whole adventure, and my dad is like, you're not going to buy that, are you? This guy seems like an idiot. Like, there is literally so much stuff going on here. Like, it just looks like a nightmare. And like, I agreed. And this would have been mid-December 2022. But then I went back, I thought about it. I'm like, man, if I want to become like the known person in land and like real estate, like, what better opportunity to try and just take to the next level than just buy a town? So that was kind of the impetus of actually making the purchase, which had its own whole ordeal and difficulties itself, the actual purchase of it.
Yeah. Let's I want to talk about that too. I also want to talk about how the hell you got this guy to sell it too, because if he wouldn't even let you sample the well, I'm just picturing, and dude, I am probably generalizing here and I should not be, but I'm picturing this dude out of like a Wild West movie, dude. And you already had your cowboy hat on in the video, so I think it's fair. But I'm picturing this guy with like the ratty jeans, maybe like a loose shirt with no sleeves.
Definitely got a snake in his boot.
Snake in his boot for sure, dude. Maybe straw in his cap. I don't know, but older gentleman, I'd imagine, like in his like 70s or like.
No,
am I off on that?
No. You're kind of you would think all this stuff, yes, but y'all are a little bit off here. He's probably I don't know, mid to late 40s. Relatively younger guy. He inherited it from his grandma. May Carson is kind of the famous owner of Cornudas. She bought it in 1982. And she passed away in 2019, and she was the hard ass, like real hardcore, like, you're sleeping on the floor tonight type deal, like carrying a gun in her boot. Like she was the lady to do that. But when he took over, it's just a lot going on out there, man. I can't really talk too bad about him, but because he had a lot going on, I think. And what it came down to is he owed some back taxes on the property. And so he was in a situation where he was either forced to sell to me or he was going to go to foreclosure at the county courthouse. And so that was kind of making it a whole tricky and interesting negotiating process as well during the buy period. But what he wanted me to do was kind of meet him down at the courthouse and do like a handshake agreement and give him a cashier's check for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. And I finally convinced him to actually close through the title company. And we did like this whole quick close, and as you can imagine, he wouldn't let me do any inspection, any due diligence, nothing. It was like whatever you buy, you're stepping into and you own it. So thankfully there was no environmental disasters or anything like that, but there's just been problem after problem because it just got ran down into the ground since he took it over.
What'd you buy it for, if you don't mind us asking?
I've actually never disclosed the price, but I have said multi six figures.
Okay.
So that's a fair answer, by the way, but what is your vision for it? So you buy this town, like it's something that you've never done before, right? I mean, what's the plan with it? Is it something that you're going to fix up? Is it a long-term hold? Do you think that what's coming in is just worth it to keep it and kind of maintain it? I'm just curious there.
So everything is subject to change, of course. But right now, my goal with it is to hold it forever. Like I want to pass it on to my kids, and I want it to be kind of the oasis of the desert. And my plan is to kind of own a big ranch out there and in various different places in Texas. So it's going to be kind of just a little token in my back pocket, basically, that I plan on holding forever. And the actual kind of vision for the property specifically is to make it kind of a tourist and kind of rest stop in the middle of the desert. You got Guadalupe Mountain National Park right there. So people staying out there for that. And then the cafe is very famous. That thing's been there for at least 40 or 50 years, the Cornudas Cafe. And so the goal for it is to get the cafe back up and running and kind of make it the famous stop in the middle of the desert, and people staying there as well in short-term rentals for the national park, and kind of just outfitting it for that with different lodging. I want to do some of those geodesic glamping domes out there. And then, the gas, the cafe, selling ice, sodas, chips, the whole 9 yards.
Well, this is cool, John, because the area or the town that you bought could be the place that people have to get to when they need gas. And it could be like this would be like, okay, shit, we made it. We have to deal with whatever's here. Or it could be exactly what you said. Like maybe it's a destination in between somebody's travel. Maybe people stay there for a night. Maybe it's like people are actually seeking out to go to this place. And that's the coolest part about the fact that you own it now, is like you can make this thing whatever you want, assuming that you can, generate the funds or have the funds to do it. So that's awesome. I think that's pretty cool. There's more and more Airbnbs and short-term rentals coming on the market in places that are obscure that people haven't heard of, because a lot of people are trying to escape the madness. They're trying to get out of the cities. They're trying to get out of, whatever that, tied to their phones and the technology that I'm addicted to, right? Like if you can get out and go to
Cornudas, dude.
Cornudas.
Just
Cornudas,
say it, dude.
let's go.
Texas, which to us Northeasterners, like, I don't mean to make fun of it. I just haven't heard of it for the show.
You would probably be amazed at what the West Texas landscape actually looks like with the cactuses and, just the desert shrub. And it's just, there's actually mountains out there too, which is cool. And on that property, you can actually see the Milky Way on a clear night, which is kind of the only spot in that area, I think, that you can. You got El Paso light polluting on the west and Carlsbad light polluting on the east. So unless you go south, down near Big Bend, you can't really see the Milky Way or good stars. So that's kind of cool.
You can't, for those listening, you can't conceptualize the view of this thing. We tried to explain it, but it really does look like something out of a movie. Like just at least the clip you posted on there. I'm not even going to try to re-explain it, but I would just recommend people go follow you on social. Can you remind us of your Instagram handle where people can find you?
Yeah, at Jon Jasniak on all socials.
Perfect. So I would go check that out, and that's not just a plug for his social. Like genuinely, it's awesome. It's so cool. He's rocking the cowboy hat, but the background is like I don't know how to explain it, man. It looks like out of a John Wayne movie, and I'm just like looking at the desert scene. Is that? And you just bought a town in the middle of the desert, dude. It's so cool. I think that does play to you in the land flipping. It's just it's a great marketing tool, but I love how you're going to keep it forever for generation. Try to essentially revitalize it. For me, I'm thinking, everybody has different exit strategies and what they're going to do. And I think it's really cool. You mentioned the diner and all that. For me, I immediately went to short-term rentals. I'm like, dude, you could put up so many cool different things out there. I thought like maybe something like Joshua Tree. I'm not sure what kind of like architecture I'd want to go out there, but there's a lot of guys we know doing things in Joshua Tree. And I just thought it kind of was synonymous a little bit with desert style of these properties.
Yeah, I mentioned I want to do the dome. I would love to do like a UFO based one out there, like short-term rental. Just get creative with it. Right now we have a 6-bed motel, a 6-spot RV park, and 3 mobile homes on the property. So I'm using those mobile homes right now as short-term rentals. One of them's been rented out. I haven't been pushing it at all, and people have kind of been hitting me up like wanting to rent it out. We're doing $125 a night for a 1-bed, 1-bath mobile home out there. For people. It's a nice mobile home though. We furnished it. It's actually really nice. And of course you got the cafe and the convenience store there. So there's a lot of stuff. It's 28 acres and there's a lot of stuff kind of packed into it. And then of course, like you guys are saying, you got the desert landscapes, like middle of nowhere backdrop, like Western type vibes.
It is, dude. So there's a whole other like layer to this. There's multiple layers, but you bought a town. So what does that make you? I know you own the town, but like
the mayor.
Yeah, exactly.
The
do
mayor.
Do you hire a mayor? I know it's very small. But like, what are the steps there that you mentioned bringing people back into work at the cafe? I'm like, okay, how does
they're on payroll of your
strange
payroll of the town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, do you run the ship, dude, or like how does the government kind of tie into this? I'm just so curious.
Yeah, so I do run the ship. I guess I'm technically the mayor. I have a mayor hat, a mayor shirt. People kind of joke like, "Oh, I'm the mayor." There's no actual like government entities because it's unincorporated, but it's gotten some attention from the congressman out there in El Paso and kind of other local municipalities. Like it's on the map, and it actually has a spot on the map. I think last I looked, I'm like 250 or 300 G's into it and improvements, just all miscellaneous stuff, water tanks, security cameras, doors, furniture, blah, 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 roofing. So there's more work to be done still there. And what's crazy is like kind of my basic vision with it being like the kind of rest stop or tourist stop is more than achievable, but kind of just like the moonshot. If I really wanted to go next level, I could actually start buying up surrounding land and, subdividing that and running water lines. And there's actually a play out there for incorporating the town that I could take and go that route. That would be like a ton of work. Like you're talking hundreds of thousands in water infrastructure, power infrastructure. Like just to drill a water well out there is $100,000 because it's 1,000 foot deep. So you can imagine kind of undertaking that would involve, but it is possible.
Damn, dude, this is super intriguing and very like, we talk about real estate a lot and people, well, pretty much every episode, and people are always talking about multifamily, buying up a single family home or Airbnbs and all this. But the fact that you bought a town is very, like, it makes you super unique. And I think that's the selling point for anywhere you go. And it's a great marketing tool, but it reminds me of way back in the day, dude, when like this stuff was possible. You almost think it's not possible now, just like the way the dollar has gone down in value and just the world has changed. Technology's advanced. Like I'm thinking back to when the first road was built, right? And then like everything starts getting built up around it. They cut down the trees, they build the cities, and everybody floods in. You're basically going back to the older days, and the fact that you have the ability to even do this, and this is even a conversation, is so cool, dude. So kudos to you for taking the leap. I'm I think it just it makes your story amazing, outside the land flipping in general. Like I'm pretty jealous. I wish I could be, maybe I could be your deputy or something. It's badass.
We'll get you a sheriff's badge.
Sounds good.
So, John, let's talk about, like, let's say people want to get involved in land flipping. I know you have some products that you offer. Like, what's the best way, maybe if you were starting today, or what's the strategy that you would use to get started if you were doing it again?
Yeah, if I was doing it again, I would try to scale up quicker. And so that means getting a mentor, which I actually never had. I learned everything the hard way. And like you said, I do give it back to people now and my mentorship stuff that I got going on. But the best thing people can do to get started is you got to just get that first deal under your belt. Start small. I don't care how much money you have, like 10, 20 grand, even under 10 grand. Do a flip, do a deal, sell it for 2 or 3x what you bought it for. Do a few of those. And then immediately, I think you should be looking towards subdividing. Subdividing is the best way to scale the business. It's kind of my bread and butter nowadays is, buying 100 acres for $500,000 and selling it for $1 million or $1.5 million and doing that at scale, because what you got now is kind of land flipping, which is still a niche type industry, I would say, but it's becoming more and more competitive every day. So you got people like me coming on podcasts, talking about it, coaching it, selling courses, etc. But subdividing and doing it at scale is just still like the wild, wild west. Like there's nobody doing it. It's not that difficult, especially if you do it in the right areas. Like we don't even work with developers. We don't do any entitlement, rezoning, any of that. Like I'll go out and buy 100 acres outside of city limits, 30, 45 minutes outside of a medium to large size city, break it down into 5, 10 acre lots, whatever, and turn around and sell it for 3, 4, 5x. And that's the best way to make real wealth, I think, in the land space. But you're not going to start there, right? So start with just a couple of flips and then go from there. Get that first deal under your belt.
So real quick, just because you mentioned it a couple of times, but for people that don't know what subdividing is, can you explain that? And can you talk to how you get permitting or whatever you need to do to actually be able to divide it up?
Yeah. So it's funny. I had a phone call with a guy today. He's like, I'm looking to rezone and entitle and all this stuff. And he joined my program. And I'm like, dude, we don't do any of that. Like, if I got to start contacting cities and going to council meetings and like trying to rezone and get permits and everything, like, I'm out. Like, that's too difficult. There's too much risk. Like, you can make big bucks doing that. The more difficulty you have in something, the more money you're going to make. Like, that is one method of subdividing and doing developing. But what we do is I like outside of city limits in the county where it's close enough to the city so people can get, 20, 30, 45 minutes away. So they're basically, get the city feel. But you got a ton of folks who want to actually move outside the city and just live on 5, 10, 20 acres with either a barn dough or a mobile home, or maybe they want to build a home, have some livestock, etc. So no restrictions, no zoning. People can mostly do what they want. And there's still a ton of areas where you can do this in the United States. Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, the Carolinas, Florida, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, like even where y'all are at in rural parts of Pennsylvania and Virginia, like I mentioned, you can do this all day long. Just buying land in bulk, you get a discount on it, obviously. The more you buy, the lower it's going to cost per acre. And then breaking it down into smaller lots relatively easily, and then selling it off to customers in the city who want to move out and live on 5 or 10 acres.
So just to drill down a little bit more, how do you break down the lots specifically? Like I'm thinking just like a parcel land, call it a perfect square, and you're divided up into 5. How do you know who you're sending out there to do this, right? And then how are you breaking it up? And are you just having a note for each of the parcels, I guess?
Yes, a note for each of the parcels. How it's actually broken up is with a surveyor and a survey. Now, kind of how you can break it out in really 2 portions of 2 facets of subdividing, either a minor subdivide or a major subdivide. Like a minor subdivide is literally all you need to do is run a surveyor out there, tell him or work with him and him or her and be like, this is how I want the property breaking out. Maybe it's a perfect square and you want to make 4 smaller perfect squares, and boom, it's just breaking 1 into 4. And literally sell all those off and create notes or sell them for cash, whatever you want to do. In the minor subdivide case, it's super simple. You're outside of city limits. You probably have great road access, and you're just simply creating smaller lots with a survey. Now, a major subdivide, if people have the video view of this, like I have a major subdivide plat behind me on my wall. It's got 74 different lots on it, some as small as 1 acre. And major subdivides, it can be a little more complex. We're still outside of city limits, but the county's going to get involved and probably make you build some roads. We like to do dirt roads, probably run some power, make sure your lot frontages are correct, etc. But it's still relatively easy. It's just a survey at the end of the day and abiding by all the rules and minor infrastructure upgrades such as roads, power lines, stuff like that. And that's like big bucks. Like that project was $5 million back there.
Got it. So last thing I'll ask is when you're going through this, say you mentioned a lot of different states and there's people that don't live in those states. Is this easy to do? Nothing's easy, but is it relatively simple to do if you put your nose to the grindstone living out of state? I'm thinking like for us trying to do this in Texas or another state. Okay. You don't have to have a built team.
Nah. I work with a lot of people who do this out of state. They're, in California and they want to do it in Texas on Texas land. It's doable. It's going to be a little bit more difficult because I like to do like boots on the ground in my projects. And so I always recommend look around you, like within the 2 to 4 hour radius. That way you could get boots on ground if you need to. But with a decent, like you said, nose to the grindstone, like a decent amount of effort, you can do it anywhere, man. You could be in Michigan and do Texas land. I mean, it's more than possible to do subdivides in Texas, especially if you just run a realtor out there and have them get boots on ground for you.
Cool. Yeah. Side note, I was in Vermont this past week and there's just land for days. I mean, it's mountains, right? But It's so cool to realize that a lot of people, and even just talking to some of the town folk, they don't want people around. There are people that want to escape the city. They want to go. We had a previous, like an old neighbor, he had a great place on the water down on the coast. And he just decided to go move to Vermont and buy a massive parcel of land and put a farm on it. And we're like, dude, like there's just people out there that are doing this. So, there's someone for everyone. And I think that's in the real estate game too. You can always find an end buyer, as long as the buy box is good. But I have a fun one for you. It's interesting. We have people that have dollars in their account that are listening to this podcast and they're trying to grow that. A lot of them are aspiring real estate investors and they're just like, they just want to know what to do with it, right? And they listen, like, I can start this. You listen to the Side Hustle Show. There's a lot. So, kind of sidebar question, but if you had 50 grand, say Ryan and Corey handed you a check for 50 grand, how would you double that in the quickest amount of time possible?
I would go out and find a undervalued piece of land and do a small subdivide on it. So 50K subdivide, more than doable. If I'm lucky, I'll get some seller financing on it and about to just give a little bit down and pay monthly and then subdivide it off while I'm paying the seller. But $50,000 you could easily turn in. I don't want to say easily, but with the right knowledge, you can turn it into 100 to 200K within 6 months with just a small little basic minor subdivide. There's so many of those out there. It could be done anywhere. That's what I would do with it.
Very cool. Part B of that, sorry not to cut you off. Have you thought of this in your lane of business? But you have all this knowledge, right? And I know you get the mentorship, but like on the side, like have you thought about being kind of like a broker or a paid mentor for someone to say, hey, someone has 200K. They're like, John, I want you to double this or I want you to triple this using your skill set. You get a cut of it. Just take my dollar. Essentially like almost like a lender, right? Like you're the boots on the ground guy. They provide the capital. You're just running the show. Have you thought about that?
I've thought about so many different things in this business, man, from selling data to creating courses and mentorships to brokering deals, brokering notes. I could do that too. Like people got notes they want to sell. Like I know all the note buyers. I put them in contact with them. There's so many different possibilities. Yes, I've thought about it where that starts to break down for me. What you mentioned in particular is like when I start working with investors and people with money, like I'd either just do like some sort of fund or, LLC raise and do the project myself. I get a lot more bang for my buck, or just take them on as debt and pay them 16 to 18% interest, which I do on some land deals. We just did one in Andrews County, Texas, where it was a $510,000 purchase. And I borrowed $450,000 from a private guy at 18%. So, I just have debt on the deal and I get all the upside and they get 18% return on their money collateralized by the land. So if I default, they take the land and do it themselves. Yeah.
18% is great. Like that's a lot more than a lot of hard money out there. So that's awesome. So John, I know for a fact that not everything is rainbows and sunshine over there, although it sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing things. So this question comes from a place of trying to get to know you a little bit better, just like, maybe a fault of yours. I'm curious about your biggest mistake that you've made in your journey, and maybe how you learned from it and how that has made you better for, who you are today.
So I don't really consider myself a cocky person. I don't really consider myself a humble person either. I'm probably somewhere in between, honestly. But a deal I'm going through still right now, my biggest mistake, I think I got way too cocky when I was kind of in the beginning stages of my subdividing and stuff. I had a couple of good projects. I'm like, man, I know I can do this. Subdividing, it's easy. I'm making all this money. I buy this project in Howard County, Texas, and I didn't do my due diligence. I got some bad advice. I just kind of rolled with it. Just, this is going to be great. And we went and we sold off 15 lots on this project. And then like a year and a half later, the county comes back and is like, oh, by the way, you need to go through a platting process on this and your subdivide is illegal. And so we did this whole deal, and the county, we spent probably 50 to 100 grand, and just like, all my customers are pissed at me, like, when is this thing going to get approved? And it's just been this whole headache that my attorney we were just on a call on it still this week. It's been like a year trying to get this thing pushed through because we sold all the lots off and we shouldn't have. So that created a huge problem, trying to get everyone to sign off and go back and redo everything. And second, I wouldn't even done the project in the first place if I had to go in and do a platting process and build a $200,000 dirt road and all. The land is just like hunting land. It's like not even that valuable. And so I don't think I'm going to lose money on it at the end of the day, but the amount of stress and stuff it's caused has just been, it's been such a pain. And that's kind of where myself nowadays, like, I do so much deep dive on these regulations and subdividing and stuff before I do a project. Same with my students. Like, I'll walk them through all of it. It's like, you really got to know if you have to like build a road or you have to go through approval or whatever before you start doing a project. And you can't get cocky, man. You gotta humble yourself real quick. I don't care if like you're Grant Cardone or like Donald Trump, like making millions and billions of dollars. Like, stuff can happen to you. I guarantee it. So, yeah.
And John, thank you for sharing. I think that's awesome. I also think sometimes it takes something like that for somebody like you to recognize what mistake you won't make again. Like a perfect track record you don't learn anything from it. And obviously that sounds great. But I imagine if you have a perfect track record, then you're not really growing that much because you're doing something that you're used to, or you haven't stepped outside of your box. So the mistakes are as important as the wins, in our opinion. And I know we've made our fair share. So thank you for sharing that. It's awesome. Well, last question for me. Knowing what you know now, John, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you had to go back and talk to him? And I always preface this with, my 18-year-old self probably wouldn't listen to me, but maybe yours would listen to you. So what advice would you give him?
I don't know, man. If I'm not cocky now, I was definitely a cocky little prick when I was 18 and thought I knew stuff that I didn't. I would definitely say you got to try a bunch of stuff and be open to learning and be a continual learner when you're that young. And it's pretty much impossible for any 18-year-old to conceptualize because you're probably graduating high school, or you think you know what you're doing, you're going to school, or maybe you're just entering the workforce, whatever. You think you got it figured out. So I think it's almost impossible to do or conceptualize, like hindsight 2020. Like, I didn't read my first non-school related book until I actually graduated college at like 22, 23 is when I actually picked up a book that was like, I wasn't assigned or anything like that, and actually like started learning real stuff.
I think I was 26 or 27, so I'm right there with you.
Dude, like the quicker you can do that, the better. And like I said, it's pretty much impossible to do when you're 17, 18 years old. But you got to try a bunch of things. You got to read a bunch of stuff, watch a bunch of YouTube videos, just be like a sponge. If you can do that, like, hopefully, like me, you kind of just figure it out and you find, something that sticks. If you try enough things, like, I think you're going to find that one thing that sticks and you kind of resonate with.
I think that's great advice. Gary Vee said something like that. Like, people are like, I don't know what I want to do. It's like, well, if you don't try a bunch of shit, then you'll never figure it out.
Exactly.
It's pretty simple. So very good advice. John, this has been awesome. I've learned a lot today, and Ryan and I do our best to have episodes that are not repetitive and not give the same advice and information. And we certainly did that today because it's something I've never met anybody that's bought a town. So thank you, Mayor, for coming on. We appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you and they want to follow your story, follow your journey, maybe become a member of your program, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
At Jon Jasniak on all social medias. I answer all DMs. I answer all emails. John@jonjasniak.com. If you got land deals or just questions or whatever, I answer it all. I love looking at deals. I'm like obsessed. I'm a fiend when it comes to land. I love it. So would love to look at your deals. Would love to help you out. Would love to coach you, or just chat about whatever you got. And I super appreciate you guys having me on. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, dude, it was our pleasure. Thanks for dropping some bombs on us today. It seems like a very lucrative and viable option for a lot of people. And I don't know, honestly, something that I think we might consider too. It's a totally different take on real estate. I'm glad something like this exists, and you're the perfect guy to have on the show. So thanks again, man.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Weekly Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod, where we post daily tips and tricks and document our own journey towards financial freedom. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice.